Hi everyone, I'm Paula from Earth Moves and I'm interviewing Mark Simmonds today from Co-ops UK. Mark has done incredible work with Earth Moves and a lot of similar organisations. He's extremely learned and so helpful and encouraging for social enterprises in particular. Mark is a real expert on cooperative business. He's actually set up his own cooperative pub, which is incredible. And he really seeks to empower communities to do things for themselves. He's an advocate of true democracy as well, which is one person, one vote, not just the person who has the most money to invest in the project. So I'm still learning about cooperatives, but I really feel that it's the right way to go, because my experience in Earth Moves has seen that if people cooperate, a lot more gets done. Mark, could you just explain to us what a cooperative business is, what the structure is? How is it different from, just a straightforward business?
Yeah, so there are internationally agreed definitions of what a cooperative is that I could read out, but basically they come down to that all cooperatives are businesses in that there's a trading relationship. So it's a way of democratizing our economies at human scale. So they are businesses run by the people who trade with them. So, for instance, a housing co-op is the tenants are also the landlord.
Okay.
In a worker co-op, the workers are also the employer. In a consumer co-op, the consumers own the business. So they're like the co-op in the UK that people are most familiar with. Started as the Rochdale Equitable Pioneers, setting up their own shop in Rochdale to deal with their own food poverty, their lack of access to decent food, and also often forgotten as quite a political move to actually generate capital to then actually build villages of cooperation around Rochdale. So it was quite a political journey that they set out on, but that they eventually set up over 1,600 of those consumer societies across the country. So where I'm in West Yorkshire, 4 years after they'd done that in Rochdale, we're about 15 miles away, we had our own cooperative society here. And that was quite important before, there were councils or anything like that. It was the co-op that set up the libraries. And it was often the cooperators that then went on to be key people in the councils as they developed. So particularly in the north of England, really, really important in developing stuff. And we have other sorts of co-ops as well. So more modern now, we've got energy co-ops where people come to either source their own electricity or generate their own electricity. So pretty much anything, apart from things that we don't really want, like arms manufacturer, you can find a co-op that's doing it with a different, whether it's farming, whether it's courier delivery, whether it's taxi driving, or whether it's just owning important things in your community, like your pub or a pier or a harbour or a piece of woodland. I'll stop.
If it's so great, why doesn't everybody do it? Because I don't think that if anyone was listening to that, they could really disagree, even if they were a conservative or apolitical or socialist, it all seems to make a lot of sense, that people get together, they invest time and effort, and then they, create jobs for themselves, preserve wildlife, woodlands and whatnot. Why is it so hard, do you think, for this way of working together to be, more popular than perhaps it should be?
There's several reasons that I can think of. One is it's bloody hard work. I mean, setting up any business is hard work. So you've got that obstacle to get up. But even if you're setting a shop just on your own as a lone wolf entrepreneur, that's hard work. So there's that just pure, nuts and bolts of it. But also, I mean, in the 19th century, when the Rochdale Pioneers set up, there was this sort of real crisis. I mean, we're in times of austerity now that were far exceeded then. And I would say it's probably one of the reasons why we're seeing a really growth in co-ops at the moment, because times of crisis are times of co-ops. Because when if where everyone's comfortable, even though we're like atomized and alienated and sitting in our own homes just watching a square box and thinking we're happy, that what's your motivation to go out and do something? Whereas when that starts to disintegrate, as it will do more and more, then co-ops will come more to the fore. So I'm probably not speaking for all of the sort of cooperative movement, which is quite a wide movement. And you mentioned Cooperatives UK, so this is certainly not the sort of the strategic focus of Co-ops UK. I just happen to be on the board of it, but my main co-op is Co-op Culture, that I do co-op development for. But I'm looking at creating co-ops as lifeboats, rather than we're gradually going to take this dysfunctional capitalist economy and gradually turn it into an economy as if people mattered. What we're actually doing is creating lifeboats and seeds of things, and also people are in real trouble at the moment. So a lot of this sort of mutual support, mutual aid is around coping with what's here, but in a way that it can then be the seeds of what will need to come after us in this sort of post-capitalism, post-carbon world, whatever that looks like.
And because it will force people to make different decisions, which segues onto my next point. A lot of things, like my background's in psychology, and a lot of things that I've read recently seems to suggest that there's actually generally more kind of narcissism, individualism, and actually more depression. And I think a lot of people's dreams and ambitions get squashed by other people's kind of dominance. Like I notice with some people that even when it's just me and them, I can tell they're trying to create a hierarchy between just the two of us, where of course they're on the top. And that's a game I don't really engage with. But it's good to know that there's another strand of thought going along that is about cooperative, because all they know is the structures of capitalism and patriarchy, and perhaps the monotheistic religions that they're also part of. That it's like they can't, it's really hard for them to look at a different way of being. And I guess that's part of your work as well, is to just try and explain to people that it's what's in the community's interest is also in the individual's interests. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, those are certainly in line with cooperative values and principles. It's often harder to work within a co-op, even though it's so much more rewarding and actually has better social outcomes at the end of it. Because sometimes it's quite nice just to go, imagine if you were an employee and it wasn't a worker co-op, and you just go, you turn up, you do your stuff, you nick a few post-it notes, and you go home and you forget about it. Whereas with a worker co-op, you're a lot more involved, you go a lot further, and also you've got to go to meetings. And so one of the challenges, I think, and one of the big things I'm really interested in, particularly in worker cooperatives, is the emergence of new forms of governance, because we're still using the legal structures that are used by sort of normal business, and often a lot of the sort of management structures are replicated, and those hierarchies can be replicated. So I'm particularly interested in things like sociocracy that can sort of ways of actually working together that can reflect those values around democracy, and particularly it's around power, around sharing power. So you can get dysfunctional co-ops where power is centralized and you get founder syndromes and things like that. So it's building a culture where that is less likely to happen, and sort of having the tools to it's basically it's having a different operating system. So we're forced to use many of the sort of the terms, the ways of working of the world that we're existing in, and that sort of like it taints cooperation a bit. And I don't actually get that sort of evangelical about co-ops. I'm more about what does this group of people want to do if I'm in a role where I'm trying to help, or what do we want to do if I'm part of that group? And I find that people automatically set up co-ops, so that cooperation is inherent.
Yeah.
It's and the sort of the creation of hierarchies where people take power and take resource and often give away work and enslave people. It's theft basically, and cooperation is sort of antithetical to that. But
I think we're all convinced by Darwinism. It's always like in school and whatnot, like this hierarchy of evolution, which kind of gets better and better all the time, which is rubbish because different animals have different niches in the ecosystem. They have different skills. Like you couldn't, for example, like my snake can, strike at a mouse in like it's such an incredibly fast speed that if your body did it, you'd die. So all the animals have their own like specialities, and yet we're inculcated with this view that like human beings are, at the top. And I think that feeling of hierarchy and dominance is behind environmental disaster that we're witnessing right now, as well as the mental health epidemic as well, because 80% of people in Britain experience bullying in some way in work. I mean, that is an atrocious figure, and there's absolutely no way we need to be working like this, because in these situations we're not productive anyway, we're resentful, we don't go the extra mile when we're being bullied. That's been proven as well. Where in my work in Earth Moves, it's like I just do it all the time, and I am really driven from an ideological point of view to kind of make things happen for the community, because I think we're all gonna die, we're all gonna leave, drop off this mortal coil, and it's what we leave behind. And in our case, it's trying to create 4 acres of space where people can relax and grow food and learn about these things that you're talking about. But it could be ideologically as well. It could just be how you bring your kids up. There's a lot of ways that you can kind of change things. But I take your point that like we are living within the frameworks of capitalism, and the capitalist system makes us think in a certain way.
I think we all need some autonomy in our lives. So for instance, one of the local co-ops that I've set up local to me is an allotment society. So there were no allotments where I live. So a few of us got together, we rented a bit of land, and then we bought it, and it's divvied up. But within that allotment, which is a co-op, where together we're able to have an allotment where we couldn't have individually bought a plot of land to do that. But we have autonomy within that allotment, and I think, it's almost a reaction against the atomization that in modern societies is we need somewhere where we've got control and where we can, not just be told what to do and pushed about. So I think that there's an innate desire to have have a little bit of control over over your little bit of the world. But then when cooperation comes in is how that interacts with the rest, because we can't all be one person kingdoms, as it were. You've got to cooperate with other people, because you can't do everything that you need. There's I've got a book behind me somewhere that speaks to your other point. You mentioned Darwin. This is an interesting book here by a chap called Martin Novak, which is around the evolution of cooperation, and it debunks some of that sort of social Darwinism stuff, that because a lot of people jumped on like, oh, because of the work of Darwin, that proves that it's survival of the fittest, which Darwin never said. And
really, Darwin never said that?
No, that was just tacked on.
Wow.
But that it's nature red in tooth and claw, and it's whoever claws their way to the top. Whereas a lot of the research around cooperation has found that innate cooperation within the animal kingdom, and also Kropotkin as well wrote his book around mutual aid as well, which was a sort of reaction to that, how Darwinism was being used. So so there's lots of stuff that sort of frames the world that we're in that isn't actually true, that has just become part of the culture.
Just like concepts which are installed in us, which just help the system along. And, in nature, there is competition as well. Let's be honest, one plant might want to grow another plant. So competition is there, but so is cooperation. Our bodies are living examples of cooperation. Without the heart, without the brain, without the eyes, without the hands, all the organs working together to create one entity. And we're actually a community of billions of cells who have their own little identity. So it just shows, and even like in normal businesses, people really naturally cooperating all the time, in the health service and whatnot, people are always engaged in that. But I just don't think, it's like emphasized in our system as being as important as competition. That's like the main kind of driver, isn't it? And I think while being in a competition is fine if that's where you are, but when it's subtle and it's non-verbal and it's to do with someone else's unconscious bias and their like racist, classist opinions about you, and trying to push you down due to that sort of like psychological kinds of manipulation, it's all got to stop. And it's all, for me, all these kind of mindsets are all connected to environmental devastation, especially species annihilation, which is just atrociously depressing when you read the statistics of how human intervention is just ending whole groups of species. Like, what is it, like over 1,000 a month, isn't it? Something terrifying like that.
I don't know. It's a lot though, and it's a lot higher than the background extinction rate has been.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and sometimes you feel like, what's the point? Because because there's really, really big changes. Capitalism is going to either destroy itself or destroy us, or even both of them. And there's real the real uncertainty about whether that we can avoid the climate crisis tipping point. So
we can't carry on. A system based on mindless consumption is going to end up in this situation, because we're all encouraged. And I'm just as bad sometimes. I try and buy vintage clothes, secondhand clothes and that, but sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just want things because that's just the way it is. You're made to believe that when you consume something you're kind of happy and that, but you're doing it often from a place of emptiness. And when you get them new shoes and whatnot and you're like, oh great, and then you're like, and then the emptiness just comes back anyway. But I find like when I'm doing things for the community and I'm helping people and I'm outdoors just doing like nice things like that gap is filled inside of me, and I don't feel empty. I feel like I'm doing something constructive, and I think other people get that feeling as well. So what would you say if there was someone now listening to this video and they're thinking, oh, that's great, you know, I want to set up a cooperative. What advice would you give them?
So there are lots of people out there who can help you, not least other people who've already set up cooperatives. So my first bit of advice would be just do a bit of research first before you sort of ring up someone like me or email me. And I do spend quite a lot of my time just sort of talking to people who've got ideas, and often if they're at that very early stage, I'm signposting them off. So for instance, if if your local pub was going to be turned into housing and it was up for sale and you thought, oh, you could buy it, there's over 100 other local pubs that have done that. So there's a chance how you can find one near. There is a support program set up to help communities set up local pubs. And it just depends what sector you're in. So there are groups that are helping career co-ops set up. There are groups that support community-owned farms. There are groups that just support worker cooperatives. So they're more interested in just workers taking control of their livelihoods, whatever sector they're in. So try and find someone who has done what you're thinking of doing. Maybe even go and see them, and some of these support programs will pay for you to go and visit them. Obviously COVID has interfered with that a bit recently, but just do some research and say, right, okay, I'm thinking of doing this. Here's some other people who've done something similar. They've succeeded, and actually I can't see anything different about what I'm trying to do, or maybe I can see something different that's going to make it even better. So and it's like baby steps. It's like, all right, so yeah, it is possible. And so you're adding layers on, really. So what I would do after that is, well, one of the things about co-ops is that they're more than one person. So I would try and find other people to explore the idea with, because it's very difficult to create an empty co-op. So I spend hours, in my attic designing the most perfect co-op to do a thing about it, and then I present it to my community and they say, oh, it's just Mark with his mad ideas again. Whereas if I get just a couple of other people and say, do you want, here's a possibility, do you want to explore it? And we'd go on that journey together. You've already got the buy-in by the time you work it up, and you've got people to help, and you've got a lot more, you've got at least two other sets of eyes on it as well. So that would be my other advice: involve people early. And then when you're at the point where actually we really want to make a go of this, then actively go out and engage with the support program. So there's a support program run by Cooperatives UK called The Hive. There are various other support programs run by Power to Change that are more around communities running businesses, so they're community shops and pubs and things like that. So depending on what you're doing, there will be different people who are able to help you as well, but you'll discover that through the research phase. But yeah, the key thing is don't be a lone wolf entrepreneur much past the scribbling on the back of the beer mat stage.
Well, Mark, I just want to say again, thank you so much for your amazing kind help for Earth Moves. It really, especially writing our business plan, would have been really hard for us to do, or impossible without your knowledge and help. So thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for chatting about cooperatives today. And I hope some people may be inspired to take you up on that offer. And I will put your contact details in the description.
Yeah, so I'm always up for a chat.
That's great. Thank you again, Mark, and I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, all right. Cheers then. Take care.
Bye. Bye.